welcome to another installment of the Fragments of Silicon reviews. 4 reviews up this week. The first of which is a game called Aground. Now, you might have seen that we did a multiplayer stream of this the past Friday. And in case you missed that, it is still in the VOD. But yeah. And if you did miss it, I think Golic summed it up best when he called it a Terraria alike. Specifically Terraria, because it is a 2D survival crafting game with a lot of underground, a lot of mining. That is definitely a thing I remember doing a lot in Terraria. Doesn't have as much underground as Terraria, because I think in our multiplayer playthrough we got to the bottom. We got to the purple bedrock, and there might be a way to tunnel past that, but we didn't get to that particular moment. Because Terraria has descending all the way down to hell, for example. I think that's another measuring stick here. Aground is definitely less than Terraria, and I mean that in a literal sense. It's not got as many options, as many materials, as many, all of the things that Terraria has. But that makes sense because that game's been around for what, 9 years, 10 years,
something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
And in spite of what the devs have said, they continually update that game. In fact, I think it just got another update in celebration of its surprisingly not canceled Stadia launch. Even though the main developer said that was getting canceled. I'm guessing the publishing partner said, no, you have to, you actually do have to honor your contract. But getting back to this game, it's it's also a lot more overall, I'd say, casual. Honest, not just in terms of Terraria, but in terms of survival crafting games. I haven't died once in this game, personally. And, during our playthrough, Petty Fan died only once because, strictly speaking, he was way, way under leveled for where that portion of the game was.
Yeah, I shouldn't have been there.
I mean, but you were, and it's a good thing that I kept hoarding stuff.
Indeed.
I said, you know what? This shit's probably going to come in handy some way. And I'm like, oh, multiplayer. Yeah, that makes sense. But anyway, like I said, it's definitely one of the most relaxing survival crafting games I've played, because I went over the stamina bars of the game, and there's at most 4. Contrast to just being on foot, you only have to worry about your health and your overall stamina. Doing actions will reduce stamina, and you either eat food or drink stuff or rest to rejuvenate that. And it's not that hard to rejuvenate, quite honestly. Maybe a bit more thorny and onerous when you have to pay for that in certain locations, but even still, not that bad. Compared to a lot of survival crafting games where you're not just worried about health and stamina, but you're worried about your fucking hunger and thirst.
Mm-hmm.
None of that here. You don't have to eat to live, which honestly I appreciate, because personally I have never enjoyed hunger in video games, or thirst. I get the point. It's realistic, even though I have yet to find a survival crafting game that actually handles that shit realistically. You are just running out of running hungry and thirsty constantly. And it's much more of a bugger to manage. And that goes all the way back to like fucking Ultima.
Red Warrior needs food badly.
That's Gauntlet.
I
Yeah.
know.
Gauntlet, your food is your health. In Ultima, no, your food is your food. You have to eat in order to survive. If you run out of food, you die. Like, that's really where that whole trope came into being in terms of video games. And obviously, in terms of survival crafting, well, Minecraft and among others, it's a very logical set of parameters to have. Just this game doesn't really have it. It does deal with encumbrance, which can be annoying, and honestly, some of the mining things that they do to alleviate it, like building a railroad system and building like later on an elevator. I hardly ever use them because, well, okay, the elevator was just like one part vertically, kind of limited the usefulness, especially since, depending on its proximity, it's still going to be a haul to get the stuff to the warehouse. Talked about that kind of thing back on Friday. Like, if you find stuff in the wilderness, you do have to carry it back to your storehouse. Versus if you build or actually craft something, it will automatically go there. There were some oversights in both. But at the end of the day, it's not that annoying. And do keep in mind, this is a crafting game in the very real sense. You will need to craft everything. Like when you get a bow and arrow, it's not just a matter to have, a bow and, the arrows just magically are there. Oh, no. You got to make the arrows. You got to make each one of them. And each one of them counts. They do stack, thankfully. Really, like, inventory overall space isn't a problem either, which is nice. It's more the encumbrance factor. Like, if you're carrying too much shit, you will slow down, and if you're really over the limit, your stamina will start draining crazy fast. But otherwise, like, the amount of items in your storehouse, you don't really have to worry about. Which I can appreciate because, once again, the inventory balancing act in other games can be quite a bit of that particular game, and not just limited to survival crafting games either. A lot of RPGs do this, or old school Resident Evil games, and it's like, I know there are people who like this shit. I've never been a particularly big fan of it.
There's a reason that when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, you try to get Bag of Holding as soon as possible.
Galaxy, you're a little quiet. Try that again.
Sorry, I had my mic up because I was eating.
Okay.
There's a reason in Dungeons and Dragons you usually try to get the party a Bag of Holding or a portable hole pretty quickly.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and like I said, there are alleviations to some of this stuff. Like, you can eventually build a teleportal network, but, like sometimes doing a thing is maybe not worth the resources. Granted, that's kind of how it works in real life. Like, a good specific example here is like Petty here has the smelter. You see that bit for steel bars where you have to use an iron bar and 2 coal. Like if you really want to get into the steel bars that way, like coal is going to be like the resource you mine out of first. I found, like, right now coal is pretty abundant in Petty Fan's area, but that coal in terms of its generation is really around the surface, the high surface. Like when you get down lower, you're going to encounter less coal and more iron ore, quartz, gold, diamond, what have you. At a certain point, it actually becomes more practical to buy steel bars than it is to generate them. Or I guess, strictly speaking, you can generate the coal elsewhere. You can burn wood to get coal, and unlike coal is a non-renewable resource in this game. Wood is, stuff like that.
Which is also kind of true in real life.
True, but though overall it's not that big of a concern in terms of getting items. Like if you run out of crafting resources, you can always buy it. You could ask, what about running out of resources on an island? Well, there are other islands. And trust me, actually running out of resources completely on an island is really difficult. It's more a specific type of resource that might not be on the island or is in one portion. And this is added with I suppose that the greatest failing of this game is honestly its combat. At best it's all right, at worst it's kind of clunky. It's not amazing. And yeah, and you're in terms of the overall plot line, well, the ground that they're talking about isn't necessarily the fact that you're stranded on an island. It's more you're stranded on the planet. When you kind of saw that in Friday's playthrough with the spaceship. That's actually the spaceship that brought you all to the planet. You're trying to escape some force, if I'm recalling, and you ended up crash landing on this world. And I do know one of the super goals is to return to space, fix the spaceship. And I do think that even after you get into space, that's not the end game.
See, I didn't even know that, but I kind of assumed it based on the fact that you were going from submarine to boat to submarine to airplane.
Yeah. And it was going to go, I presume after airplane, it was going to go to space. That being said, you don't really have to engage in the storyline quest if you don't want to a certain point. You will eventually have to do that in order to unlock more stuff, more stuff to build. But it's also, there are going to be long stretches where you're going to be nothing but resource gathering, which, once again, is kind of part and parcel for a survival crafting game. Anyway, in terms of the actual art style, it's very chunky. And the character builds kind of remind me of all things Super Meat Boy. Very rectangular. But, the actual Pixar art in conversations here is surprisingly detailed and fluid. The music, once again, the music reminds me a lot of Terraria in the sense that it's very electronic and very otherworldly, but not necessarily really fitting the setting. It's nice music, but it's not the kind of music that I think of when I'm mining or, walking through woodlands. So make of that what you will. Let me see here. So in terms of pricing, the game will clock in at $14.99. And the bundle, it's got a soundtrack. The soundtrack alone is $8.99, and the bundle is $19.90. I can't really say that it's worth getting the soundtrack because, honestly, if you're playing this game, you're probably going to hear the soundtrack a good long time unless you mute that for other stuff. Like I said, this is it's not the most commanding of your time I've ever seen in a survival crafting game. Even like compared to, like Terraria is a game that's infamous for how many hundreds of hours you can sink into it if you let it. This game is much more casual, but you're still gonna, it's still a bit of a time sink. Like, you're probably gonna be spending like an hour, or a half an hour just grabbing materials you need for this one thing that you need for this other thing. Again, refer to the playthrough that we did on Friday and the torpedoes I had to gather. That's just kind of the game, as it were, when it comes to survival crafting things. But if you're okay with that, this is a survival crafting game I've enjoyed a lot more than most. Probably because it's not so brutally difficult at the beginning. Like last year's Niflheim, I think that's the game I'm thinking of, which was another 2D survival crafting game. I do remember that game being much more brutal, and subsequently enjoying it a lot less. Once again, I get the point of survival crafting games being difficult, because it's that whole survival part. But I've often found that they can be a little too brutal in the beginning game, and kind of dissuade you from actually playing it. This one strikes maybe, honestly, on the grand scale, maybe a bit too far in the other directions. Maybe a bit too easy for a survival crafting game. Like I said, that's your mileage may vary thing, but in terms of a 2D Terraria this is a very solid affair, and one of the stronger games I've played this year so far. Granted, it's still mid-March, so there are probably games on the horizon that I'll enjoy more. Maybe not. That's what end of year awards are for. But overall, it's a really solid, say 7 out of 10 affair, on a normal ranking scale. And Petty, what are your thoughts on Aground?
I thought it was fine.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds about right. Anyway, so I'm trying to remember if Aground is on consoles yet or not. I want to give me a bit here. Live research, yada yada yada. Version. Yeah, okay, it is on the consoles. That actually launched last month. I do remember there being a bit of release disparity between PC and consoles, but it's not too much. So, I suppose another thing in this game's favor is it being a 2D survival crafting game. It's very amiable to a controller.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also simple enough where you can use all the buttons effectively. I couldn't really recommend Terraria on a controller, for example. Let alone, say, Minecraft.
Oh, God.
Minecraft's really popular on consoles and shit, but that doesn't make playing a first-person game with a controller better, okay? I mean, that tolerable at best. Anyway, so I think that's about it for Aground here. Be sure to tune in after the break, as the Gaulists will be tackling Azure Lane Crossway.